For those about to rock, we salute you on this Memorial Day. How goes it, Barry?
Good. Speaking of Memorial Day, do you know anybody who's died in a war or even been in a war?
I definitely know people who've been in a war. And in particular, my father was in World War II, but he was a typist. I mean, he came in towards the end of the war just processing soldiers. But friends of his, in particular, a couple of friends of his I knew when I was growing up because they were still friends of his. Like one guy was in a fighter plane that got shot down, and everyone on the plane died but him.
Yikes.
So and this was a guy who is sort of like like how you have an uncle who's not a blood relative, but you just call him uncle. He was
Hmm.
one of those guys.
So
And
your
so,
dad was old enough to be in World War II, huh? He
yeah,
must have just been a young kid, like an
yeah,
18, 19-year-old.
yeah. And he like they rushed him through basic training, like just to help process the soldiers. Because much like me, my dad would not have done well in basic training. So
And I imagine basic training for a typist was really tough.
yeah, well I mean basic training was basic training no matter
Oh,
who.
I know, I
Yeah.
know.
So
So it would have been the same if he was an infantryman, for
yeah,
example.
or a sniper or anything. Yeah, a pilot. Yeah. So, but again, his was I don't know how long it was, but it was quick because again, they just wanted him to like they needed to muster everyone out. You know,
So
uh,
you don't know anybody who fought in or was killed in Vietnam?
definitely not killed. I don't know, not even fought. I can't even think of anyone. No, nor in the Falklands. Or in any other or in I think another of my uncles was in the Korean War. I don't know how much action he saw. Um, but no, certainly none of my contemporaries or even like not contemporaries because I'm too young for Vietnam, but even like my older brother's friends or whatever. No, like no, because they were all still too young.
God, can you imagine how wretched that would be to be pulled into some sort of conflict like that, be drafted and shipped across the world to fight in something as ludicrous as Vietnam?
And I always
Ah,
say I would have left. I would have been a draft dodger, but it's easy to say. I don't know. I say I would have done that because I just can't imagine myself going. So I would have done anything to get out of it. Anything.
you know, I'm sure I've told you, but my family lived in Canada for about 3 or 4 years in the very early 70s. I think we moved there in 1970 and moved back to the States around 74 or something. 73, 74. Yeah, 74. Um, but oftentimes when I tell people that, they assume it's because of something related to the Vietnam War. Like my dad, took the family up to Canada for those 3 or 4 years to avoid Vietnam, which
No,
doesn't
those,
really make sense
yeah.
because when you had a family, you weren't drafted. I think that's how the draft works, is if you have kids, you're typically not going to get drafted, or if you were in college, that sort of thing.
Also, that date range doesn't make sense. If it was 67, 66, 67, 68, okay.
Well,
Uh,
I think the draft was still going on up until the early 70s. Like the Vietnam War essentially ended in 74. So
yeah,
I think the draft was still rolling up until then. I think.
yeah.
I don't know all the details about it, but just we kind of grew up, or we were born in a pretty lucky sweet spot to avoid things like World War II
Yeah.
or Vietnam or the Korean War. My dad served in the Korean War, for example. He wasn't drafted. I don't know if the draft was enacted during Korea, but anyway, he ended up over there, for 3 years. I think it was 3 years, 2 or 3 years, and wasn't didn't really see action either. He was on the periphery of it, I guess, from what he used to tell me, but didn't really see serious action. It's kind of weird how you could be so engaged in a war and not see action, but when you think about it, makes perfect sense because the actual fighting is only a small facet of what everybody's engaged in. There's this huge machinery behind this engagement. So
late
it kind of makes
late
sense.
later wars. It's funny because I've been watching this being a history geek. I've been watching this series of lectures on TV on European history. And they went through the whole all of World War One. It starts in Middle Ages and comes all the way to the present. But like over World War One, there you were in it. There was no
No,
machinery.
no,
Like there
no,
was no,
no typing.
yeah.
No, like being a line cook for the mess hall.
And you don't think about it. You think about World War II. You even think about the Civil War. You sort of know more about that. I don't know why, mainly because the World War One was fought overseas. But I mean, like the stuff that went on there, was just horrible. And again,
So,
it affected everyone,
so
and it
what was your
trapped Europe.
favorite? What was your favorite war?
Yes. Do I have a favorite war?
Because I'm a bit a sucker for war documentaries as well, specifically Vietnam and World War II. Those are my two favorite conflicts.
And so, have you
But
seen the documentary "The Fog of War"?
I
The
have
Robert
not,
McNamara.
but
Robert McNamara. Yeah, you need
I
to see
hear
that.
it's amazing.
Yeah, you should definitely see that. So, and the funny thing is, then you watch Apocalypse Now, and like the guy's surfing to Satisfaction and all. You're like, oh man, that's so cool, and the whole thing with Robert Duvall and Charlie Don't Surf and all that, and
Mhm.
and and it's like that's not. I mean, yes, they showed other stuff and all, but that part of war, that's not really what war is like.
What a skill to make something like that as entertaining as something like Apocalypse Now or Platoon. Platoon, I think, is maybe the best war movie ever, by my estimation. So horrible, so wretched. It really does a great job of depicting the nuts and bolts of trying to kill somebody and somebody trying to kill you while you're traipsing through the jungle. Do you have a favorite war movie?
I get it's not the same sort of thing, but Charlie Wilson's War.
Mm.
But it's not the same sort of
No,
simple,
not at all.
yeah. And so I don't know if that counts or not, but it's a movie. I love the ending where he goes, we did these things and they were real and they're wonderful, and then we went and fucked up the end game. And,
Was that talking about Vietnam or
talking about no, the Afghanistan war, about not going
oh
in
oh
Afghanistan and building schools and helping the people. We helped them get the Russians out, and then we just said, okay, you're on your own. And that's how we ended up with Osama bin Laden and ISIS and all that crap because we didn't follow through. We spent all this money to help win that war, and then wouldn't spend this much money for the follow up.
well, yeah, another great move by the powers that be.
Yeah,
You know, uh, uh, History is full of them, in particular this
yeah,
country over the last
and it doesn't matter
100 years.
left side, right side. It's all sides. It's
So, so it's funny that we're talking about this topic because right now I'm going through this experiment for about the last almost a month now. I have completely shut out all mainstream media, all media essentially. I have not looked at a newspaper, online website, or anything for almost a month now, um, because I'm just tired of the agenda-driven propaganda and half-truths and outright lies that essentially our mainstream media has become. And it's just an interesting thing to go through because to shut it all out, I almost feel like I'm off the grid, which is a really weird thing because I live in an urban area and in a neighborhood and I see people all the time. But um, the people I see are, usually related to my activities like yoga, golf, ping pong, whatever. So these aren't people I have these close relationships with where we're talking about current events or anything like that. So it's this weird bubble that I'm in where I literally don't know anything that's gone on in the last 3 to 4 weeks because of it. And it's fun. I got to say, it's good for my head and good for my soul.
and so does that involve music and sports as well?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
The only way I could keep up to date on that stuff is by watching games or
Okay.
watching like the recent PGA golf tournament I watched, and I've been watching the hockey playoffs. So if anything is going to seep through my blackout, it's going to be through something like that, where
Yeah.
they'll reference something going on. And
Like the nuclear war impending. Like,
yeah, yeah, like
Hey, wait, what did he
literally,
just say?
there could be something
Yeah.
that insane going
Yeah.
on that's developed over the last 3 to 4 weeks, and I would have zero knowledge of it.
Yeah.
The way I equate the media these days, you know how like we drive by millions of fast food restaurants every time we're out and about, and we know how bad it is for our bodies and our health. I kind of see media these days as being bad for your brain and bad for your soul in much the same way that fast food is bad for your health, bad for your body. And there's no reason we have to subject ourselves to it. We can deny it. We can keep it out of our lives if we want, which we should because we know it's bad. I mean, there's no two ways around fast food being bad for you. I mean, there's no argument on the other side
I-
that, oh, some fast food's good for you.
No,
Well,
I'm with
no,
you.
it's not.
I'm with you there. And I understand what you're doing. I have no problem with it myself, but I don't want to go through. I don't want to even go through a short period uninformed. I don't want to stick my head in the sand. That's not like it's fine for you. That's not the approach I want to take.
Well,
Uh,
that's the conundrum because it does feel like that's what I have to do to shut it out of my life. Um, it does feel like I'm sticking my head in the sand
these days, yeah,
to to a to a degree. Um, but I don't know if this is gonna be a permanent thing or whatever. It really is an experiment,
yeah.
and it's I got to say it's really an interesting um, way to exist for a few months in this information driven world we live in, where, because most people don't even have to go to newspapers or on websites or whatever for the news because everybody has all these notifications
Yeah.
that get pinged, their phones get pinged with from Twitter or whatever news they happen to follow. So and I've never done any of that. I would just I was old school, much like you. I'd go to the New York Times website or the Boston Globe or the Seattle Times or whatever. And the only way any news can get to me is almost by accident. Like literally, is there any huge story over the last 3 to 4 weeks? Um, Big global story that just everybody is talking about and that has these huge implications going on? Is there anything right now?
Yeah, the Who are planning their last farewell tour.
Yeah. All right, wise guy. And I already knew that.
Yeah, because you
S
need to know that. Yeah.
Yes,
There.
that would be the one thing that, oh my God, how could I miss another
Yeah.
Who farewell tour?
There was some guy in Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine, I think it was Vermont. This is a few years ago, who did what you're doing, and he did it for at least a few years. I don't remember how long it was, but it was several years. He lived off the grid and he like cut off any sort of like news couldn't get into him.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that'd be so fucking weird. Like I think he did it before COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. And it'd be so weird to like come out like during
Yeah.
COVID, like
Yeah, totally.
you know, and it's just so strange, like doing it for a week, a month, a few months, but doing it for years would be so weird. In particular, when you decide to stop doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, you've heard things like or there's been characters in movies who have been in prison for
Yeah.
decades and they get out of prison. Suddenly, they're faced with the technology that is so present these days, cell phones, computers, or whatever,
Yeah.
and how it blows these people away. But I don't even think that would be possible anymore because I can imagine they use computers and cell phones and what have you in prison these days, but that would be a similar sort of situation.
I would say, I don't want to say this, but I would say it's certainly not impossible that while you're doing your blackout, a nuclear war could start.
So, really,
With every country's nuclear capable, like with what's going on between India and Pakistan right now, it wouldn't
but
shock. it
Is
wouldn't
it any
shock me.
different than what we and I hesitate to even say what we know because we don't really know
Right.
if we're basing our knowledge on what gets fed to us through the media, we don't really know. But
Yeah, if I
it,
don't know what's going
it,
on with the Red Sox, I certainly don't know what's going on with,
um, India and Pakistan have been at each other's throats again, you know, to our knowledge for decades.
Yep.
Yeah, so has something changed over the last 3 to 4 weeks with that?
It's just that when you keep building arsenals the way they have and the way the rest of the world has, at a certain point, it doesn't take much, a tipping point. It doesn't take much for something to happen. And you put a fucking wild card Yahoo in the White House,
Hmm.
okay, and anything is possible. I would rate it as unlikely, severe, like highly unlikely, but I would certainly not say impossible. And the scary thing is the chain reaction. If any country, does that of what could possibly happen.
So, and I get all that, but has there been
No,
one or two incidents that okay, so n nothing
no,
recently that is any more inclined to set something off. Like there wasn't an assassination
nope,
by some Indian prime minister or of an Indian prime minister by a Pakistani or something like that.
nope. I just think we live in a more flashpoint world than we ever have. And it's scary. But no, not to your point, no. But again, nothing would surprise me. And like I said, the chain reaction, should anything ever happen, would just be truly frightening. So,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and that's where, like, and so now I don't do what you do, but I do read the front page, I do read the Times, I do read the Globe, and then after a bit of that, I'm like, okay, I'm done with that, and I move to sports, or I move to the arts, or I move to whatever, because
Hmm.
same thing if I'm watching the evening news, there's a limit of what I can take. So I do the same thing as you to an extent, but I do want to be informed. I do want to know what's going on. But I used to say to Kim all the time, I wish there was a good news network
Yeah,
where it's
for
only good
sure.
news. So
Well, or at least something that was truthful and
yeah.
that. But so let's just use the New York Times for example.
Yep.
Back in the day, it seemed like that was the gold standard, and um, uh,
That and the Washington Post.
yeah, and it felt like anything you would read in something as trustworthy as the New York Times, like that's okay, that's really what's going on. That newspaper has integrity. It's it's always told the truth more or less. It wasn't this agenda-driven propaganda. And if there was still a source like that, I would, still be reading the newspaper every single day, reading every inch of it. But it doesn't feel like there is something like that, and there ever will be again. And that those days are gone.
I disagree. I still trust the New York Times as much as I can, trust anything. And I do try to balance it out by reading a few different things. And so I get a more, balanced side as much as I can. My brother will actually watch like, right of center TV for that reason. That I can't do. Okay. But I do want to read different things. I don't, the Post now, since Bezos bought it is dust. But I do trust as much as I can. I do trust the Globe. I do trust the Times. And
What else do you read, or what are your other news sources? You
like
say you have
the
others.
Guardian, I'll read. Yeah, and the occasional article in the Post or the Wall Street Gazette or the LA Times or the Walla Walla Gazette.
It's oh, you mean the Walla Walla Union Bulletin?
Yeah, the Union
I would
Bulletin.
trust that more than the New York Times at this point. I swear. I'm just so down on the Times and have been
And
for several years.
why? What happened?
I feel like everything is coated in this sheen of propaganda that is mainly coming from the left, where it's so over the top and seems so out of whack, and that like it's just all agenda driven as opposed to just news driven or truth driven. Um, and I could pull it up and go through, just point out numerous articles on the very front on the front page, the splash page, where um, it to me it reeks of propaganda and purely no better than Fox News, for example. It's just coming from the other side. It's like, oh, blue team and red team. And uh, it used to be where I used to have the opinion that only something like Fox News was like that. And like, oh God, you read anything or in the New York Post or whatever. It's like, oh God, of course that's total bullshit. But now I'm feeling the same thing is coming from the other team through the New York Times or the Boston Globe or the Washington Post. And it just saddens me. It kills my soul that I
Uh,
feel that way.
and I disagree. And there are certain writers I definitely want to read, like Thomas Friedman, who does covers a lot of the Middle East, Paul Krugman, who covers a lot of the
I
economy
know those
stuff.
guys.
Yeah. And one of the things they often also do is like a full circle, a round robin, where they're all bouncing up their feelings about what's going on with what Trump is doing and all. And they always have one or two people who are like saying, like defending, not defending Trump in general, but defending like specific things like tariffs or tariffs to certain countries or something. And I'm always curious to get those point of views because I'm like, okay, well, why would that possibly be a good idea? And sometimes I agree, and sometimes I don't agree. So
So I don't ever see anything that would be the other side of whatever. So again, if I take a step backwards, I want news. I want like truthful news, not just a bunch of opinion pieces that are flavored by whatever agenda um, is being driven by that particular newspaper or corporate conglomerate that owns the newspaper and is driving the newspaper in a particular direction as opposed to I don't know. I'm trying to think of some old school reporters where it just didn't feel like they were being directed by corporate overlords and they were writing from the heart and the soul and from a place of truth as opposed to from an agenda that is basically spelled out for them. That's just my
yeah, I
overall
think you're jumping to
view of that stuff.
conclusions. I think that's way just glossing it over. I'm happy to send you articles that I think are well written and either have either even if they're choosing one side, have a good reason for why they're choosing this one side. It's well defined and well defended.
Mhm.
And it would be extremely hard to write anything where you have zero opinion.
But but that's all it is now at this point. Everything is just it's all opinion. If
But take that.
90% of it anyway, and when I say all, of course that's a bit of an exaggeration, but in general, that's what that's what it is. Everything on the New York Times splash page is some opinion piece about how fucked up Trump is or whatever. It's just the same shit over and over and over again. And then you go over to Fox News, and every single piece is an opinion piece about how fucked up Biden was and how great Trump is. And just none of it feels real to me. And I guess, like I said, it kills my soul
But
to read that stuff.
I think you're dreaming if you think like you're talking about, oh, in the old days it wasn't like that. Trust me, like, Bob Woodward, Carl Bernstein, they had an agenda. David Halberstam, he had an agenda. It's impossible to write w- just down the middle, like without having a feeling whatsoever. Like the whole point of writing anything is presenting your point of view, not just factual reporting. Then it's just like it's a news blog, it's a reporter blog, it's nothing. It's just this happened at 5:02 on Thursday. Like,
Well, isn't that reporting on news though?
yeah, I don't.
Reporting how something actually happened
Yeah,
as opposed
I
to
just I just
your
don't.
interpretation of it?
But they can give me their interpretation. I'm happy to see their interpretation. Doesn't mean I'm going to accept it.
Hmm.
Give me your interpretation. I will challenge it.
Hmm.
Okay. I don't just accept what either side says. Okay. But you're going to have an opinion. If you and I are talking about Exile on Main Street, we're going to have an opinion. If you and I were talking about Lana Del Rey, we're going to have an opinion. It may be the same, it may differ, but it'd be ridiculous to say, well, it's a record and it has 10 songs and each song is approximately 3 to 4 minutes long. I mean, that's not. You know, imagine that as a record review.
You don't think that's compelling?
Yeah. Uh, and if I'm not going too far, the songs are even bouncy. Like, it's like
So, I'm probably not doing a very good job articulating the reason why I'm doing this boycott very well. I'm not articulating it very well. It's just something. It feels like, okay, this bothers me,
yeah,
So why am I subjecting myself to it?
that makes sense. If
So
it
that
bothers you, you don't need to have a defense.
Well,
If it
yeah,
bothers you,
that's true.
you know,
That's true. And I look at it the same way using the fast food analogy again. It's like it bothers me that so many Americans flock to these places for this, instantaneous fix of salty, fatty, shitty food that makes the entire country these obese, fucking slugs who are eating themselves into a walker, eating themselves into diabetes and everything. I look at it, I look at the news flow these days. It's sort of, the same thing, except for your head as opposed to your body and your health. So,
there's an article in the Times either today or yesterday, I don't know which it was, okay, which is why are people so judgmental?
mhm.
So
Yeah.
if people want to eat fast food, fucking let them. Why are you going to nuts about that?
So, I don't see it as going nuts, but
The way you just
there,
described it, if we had a rewind button,
I'll watch back. So,
yeah.
um, so I don't like to see the shift in society and our culture just doing all these things that are bad for us, bad for our souls, bad for our health. It's not, and it's turning society into something that is bad, in my opinion. And diet is a huge one, and the fast food restaurants are a huge culprit. And it's sort of insidious in that, yeah, Big Macs and all that shit, it does taste good. I French fries and milkshakes and all that stuff. You get this quick fix, and it's really easy to get, and it's somewhat less expensive. So I understand, but it's killing so many people and making just go out in public and you can see everybody's like, not again, not everybody, but so many people in this country are so obese and
Yeah.
just so unhealthy, and I would rather be around people who aren't obese and unhealthy and just seem to have a shine to them, as opposed to just this death stare of being super unhealthy and doing the wrong things for themselves.
I certainly don't think that's all people eat fast food. And you're talking to someone who doesn't eat fast food, okay? I'm just
I know.
talking in general.
I
Uh,
I know you subscribe to the same sort of thing about
but
that.
but I do think one of the main reasons people eat fast food is for socioeconomic reasons. They can't afford, better food. Okay. And so and I'm not going to dump on anyone because they don't have the money to, eat it, at a nice place. Okay. Or also
Eating at eating at home,
I was
eating
gonna say,
fresh
or
vegetables
the
is
culinary
less expensive.
education to do that.
So, yeah, and I'm sure there's millions of reasons for why society is like this now. Um, but I just I struggle with it, and I'm not trying to come off as like I'm holier than thou about it and like, oh, do like I do but it just seems like some really obvious stuff. And when you talk to a European person who comes to this country for the first time, and they're blown away by how huge, and it's even way worse in the Midwest where I live now, or way more present. And they're like, God, what is going on with this place? Look at these people. They're so unhealthy. And they're
And,
literally waddling around.
and I lived in New Orleans. Okay. And so trust me, it was very much like that there. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see people grossly overweight and all, but it's also not my business. It's like, that's the great thing about freedom of choice. People can do what they want to do. Um, and uh, and in a perfect world, they'd have better options, they'd have better education. Although I'm sure there are some people who have better options and are well educated and still choose because they really like Big Macs or Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever. And that's, hey, if that's what you like, that's what you like.
So,
Um,
so I guess it's my own little opinion piece,
yeah,
you know. And of course, I know everybody has free will and can choose what they want to do, and there's nothing I can do about it other than talk to my buddy Ken and in a bitch fest about it.
imagine if people had told you what you had to eat.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't be good either.
Yeah, and
And
so
unless, well, no, not even unless,
yeah,
but
I don't. Yeah, no matter what it is,
yeah.
even if it was, I don't want people telling me like, no, you're eating this. You can't have that.
Yeah. Well, we
Man, when I
don't
went,
have that problem in this
yeah,
country, but maybe this country would be a little better off if we did.
and there are all sorts of things. There are countries that are far healthier than us, and yet, education wise or any sort of freedom of choice wise, they're extremely limited. And so, I think every country has its pros and cons. And I'm not the most knowledgeable person to speak country by country by any means, but there are times I look at other countries, I'm like, oh, it'd be great to live there. Then the more I research it, the more I'm like, okay, but then there's this, but there's that. Um, and let me just say, when Trump was elected, one of the first things I did, even before, like, when it was a possibility, I was looking at, well, what if I did move to Canada? What if I did move to Mexico or Costa Rica or Europe?
Hmm.
Because I think he's the worst thing that's ever happened to this country, certainly in my lifetime, easily in my lifetime, and I think quite possibly ever. And so I've got one friend who's a Republican, and I'm constantly emailing him stuff and driving him crazy. Because today Trump was posting on his Truth Social Network thing about how, happy Memorial Day to all, even the left-wing radical scum who have been trying to ruin this country for the past 4 years that I'm now saving the country from, like and
Yeah.
shit like that. It's like you're the guy, you're the
It's
fucking guy who's supposed to bring everyone together. You're the leader, you know?
it's diplomacy like that that makes me glad to be an American.
Yeah, it's like a piece at the end of a gun. So it's just stuff that like that makes me sad. And he's now, oh, you wouldn't have seen because you're in your blackout. He's in a fight with
Hmm.
our friend Bruce Springsteen.
So I did catch wind of that
Okay,
on a music website that I go to.
yeah,
So, um, and
and
that,
and
yeah. So I saw like uh, Bruce said some shit about him at a show in London, and then of course Trump, uh, you know, posted some shit online, like called him a dried up old prune rocker or something like that.
yeah, and then Bruce actually released I don't know whether CD or whatever the format was, but a live thing with those remarks included. And,
Yeah,
and Trump's now talking about having him and Beyonce and someone else investigated. Like
right.
this
But
is shades of Nixon all over again, like having an enemies list. You
so
know,
that's the sort of thing that I'm glad I don't know too much about and don't hear too much about
yeah.
because seemingly, you know, Trump says a lot of stupid shit and has for forever, and it's always painted as like he could do that, like he could actually, get the authorities involved in investigating Springsteen because he said some shit. So that sort of thing, I just don't believe it. I think it's a scare tactic, and it's just him being the complete idiot that he is. And there's a certain segment of the media that totally takes the bait and runs with it and tries to whip up this fear around that. And I
But
don't think that's too healthy.
you're worried about the people who are eating fast food. I'm worried
Hmm.
about the people who listen to what the stuff he says and buy it.
Yeah, well,
And there's a ton of people out there. Yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah.
for sure, for sure.
And so that's and they're like, well, he says he's an economic genius, so we've got to just believe him and stuff like that. I'm like, man, it's
Um,
just scary. So as scared as you are by people eating Big Macs and Kentucky Fried
I,
Chicken,
I'm not,
I'm
I'm not,
seriously,
I'm not afraid of that, by the
okay,
way.
okay.
It's
Oh,
just an
but you're bothered
observation.
by, okay,
I'm bothered by how
yeah,
unhealthy everybody is becoming in this country because of uh, because of choices they're making or
And
not
I'm worried
making.
about
But
the people being unhealthy, believing the shit that Trump says.
yeah, well, I don't.
I really, that freaks me out.
And I understand that, but I think a lot of it is whipped up by is used to stoke the fears of people like you and I, uh, in the media that I'm blacking out right now. And I think a lot of it is just
Go ahead and ask the next
it's
10
just
people you've seen.
bullshit.
Ask the next 10 people you see in Peoria what they think of Trump.
Um,
I disagree with you.
well, it just depends on who I happen to run into.
That's fine. Let's.
But
I'm happy with random.
it's funny because ever since I've lived out here, um, uh, people aren't all worked up about him, and people aren't. It's not necessarily a red uh, city or state.
No, you're near
Illinois is,
Chicago. Chicago's
yeah,
blue, you know.
and people, yeah, people. I'll hear. I've heard offhanded comments about Trump, but people aren't all whipped up in a frenzy every time he gets online and tweets something. That's the huge difference between here and Seattle. People are buying that shit so left, right, and center,
It's
or
not buying shit. He's doing it.
hook, line, and sinker. But it's not. I don't think it's. Oh,
You're
how
the
can I
president. You
articulate?
can't do this. You are the fucking president. You can't do this. Okay, you can't use social media like this. You're supposed to be a role model.
Yeah, well, th those days
It's
are long gone, and
yeah.
it's not just going to be for him. I mean that whole ship has sailed, and
I was no.
whoever
I
is
to
after him is going to
fuck
be the
that. I
same if it's the
disagree.
right side.
No. I was not a fan of Biden. Okay, not a fan. Okay, like there were some things he did fine, and other things I had a lot of issue with. He would never have done something like this, like the stuff
So
Trump
no,
does.
I'm not saying
Okay,
on
or the guy
the
before
blue
him,
side.
or
It's
okay.
going to be whoever Donald Jr. or Ivanka or whoever fills his shoes once he's gone. Um, that is going to be how things are played out now in the political realm, is what it seems like. So the ship has sailed, and that sort of lack of decorum that we would normally see with the president of the United States. I think now, that's long gone when we get the next right wing wacko
I
in
think you're
office.
probably right. I think you're probably right, but I have to hope you're wrong.
Well, sure, sure,
It's too sad. Okay,
yeah,
and let me
yeah.
just say, like there's negatives to being an old man. I wouldn't want to be a young kid right now either. This is not a world I want to be in for the next 50 years.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to ponder.
You know, I've got a niece. She's a great niece. She's 4 years old. Like, fuck, I wouldn't want to be her.
So,
And
um,
I've never
you,
felt like that
you know,
until the
is
last, you know.
I guess I think people back in the late 60s, when Nixon was coming to power,
Yep.
they had a lot of the same feelings about Nixon and how things were going to go in this country as we did when George the second Bush
Yep.
was elected, and especially his second term. It's people were led to believe that everything was going to hell in a handbasket, and now the same thing is happening again. So I, I'm not so sure that the end of the world is around the corner, because there's been other generations who were faced with the same sort of wackos or yahoos, who thought exactly the same thing. It's like, how could it get any worse than this? Or how did it get this bad? Yet here we are again, a couple decades later, talking
Who
the same thing and
who
hearing the same stuff.
who took down Nixon?
Who took him down?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, if you're to believe uh, what we've been fed, Woodward and Bernstein.
the media. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's the role of the media, whether the administration is left or right. The role